Hello learners and viewers, welcome to this session. Myself Dr. G. Uma, Associate Professor in the School of Gender and Development Studies. Today's topic is women's employment in informal sector. This topic, you could able to find and relate this topic with the course MGSE 009, Gender Issues in Work, Employment and Productivity. This course offered for the learners of Masters in Gender and Development Studies as well as Masters in Economics. I prepared this topic by keeping block 1 is my mind. When we talk about the gender issues in work, gender issues related to women's employment, we need to trace how the women mostly they have occupied in the informal sector. What is the reasons for large percentage of women are part of the informal sector? For this, I have prepared. If you read the unit 3 in the block 1, participation of women in pre-industrial and industrial societies, you could able to relate the reasons for large percentage of women as part of the informal sector. Let me start introducing the topic. All societies need human beings to work for the society to be sustained. When we do work, we spend our labor, energy and time to make our work productive. This is why often work is considered as valuable. In this session, yes, whenever we do work, if that work gives certain kinds of economic opportunities, then we consider it as valuable. Okay, work is valuable. Then why the women's work is not valued as compared to men's work? That's what we are going to learn in this session. In this session, we will learn why some work is valued more than some other work. Does it have a relationship with the informal and formal sector? In which way the women figure in this matrix? This is the 3 learning objectives as far as this session is concerned. If you look at the pre-modern societies, men, women and children work according to the simple needs they have. Mostly they contribute for the work, they do work, whatever they need for their own sustenance. There was not much presence of technology in the pre-modern society, and industry was at most. That is the existence of, we could able to find the existence of small industries that is called the handicraft or cottage industry. Often they were in the extension of household structure and labor was still not stratified or segregated for the purposes of enhancing production. There was an informality about the laboring and producing activity in the pre-modern society. Mostly the people depended on animals, cattle, horses and principally their own manual labor to add to the production needs in the pre-modern society. Mostly it was agriculture where people invested their labor to produce means of their livelihood. Like whatever they have contributed in the pre-modern society, they have done certain kinds of agricultural activities where they could able to produce certain agricultural commodities for their own sustenance. Beyond that, the work is not segregated and work is not so much of specialized in the pre-modern society since there was not much technological advancement in the pre-modern society. So in a pre-modern and pre-agricultural society, the life was still special, not that much specialized. Where there was a very less specialization in the pre-modern society, and the only very less labor was spent on producing things which fulfill the basic needs. Whatever they need for their own sustenance, like food, water and shelter, they have a very minimum needs in the pre-modern and pre-agricultural society. So the labor was utilized only that much. You must wonder, what has it got to do with women or gender? And you must know that most women work in the informal sector of our economy. All of this has to do with how an informal sector emerged in the modern industrial society. It was still seen as a sector where work was done to meet the social needs, and it did not have to do with counted as productive. Whenever we talk about informal sector, there we always think that the informal sector, they required very less skill. Mostly they used the whatever the skill they have learned by doing. The people who are part of the informal sector, they utilize those skills that have learned by themselves. They utilize those skills and they do certain kinds of activities for their own sustenance, those activities will give them very less value and less very less money for their own sustenance. Work done in this sector did not aim to enter the realms of exchange value, for it must pass through the market. Most of the informal sector people, they work in the informal sector, they do work that whatever they produce, that was not produced in a mass scale. That's why most of the production happened in the informal sector that won't directly go to the market. So clearly there are two kinds of values that our work fulfill. One is the use value, other one is the exchange value. So work done within the household and outside, which is non-industrial in nature, is seen as satisfying social needs, and thus it is not as productive as one which produces the exchange value. Here, our learners, you must understand that there are two kinds of values as far as market is concerned. One is the use value and other one is the exchange value. It is on the basis of that two sectors emerged, one based on the use value and exchange value, that is the organized or unorganized sector as far as capitalist market is concerned all over the world. So this formal or informal sector, as far as India is concerned, we call it as organized and unorganized sector. These divisions, formal and informal, organized or unorganized, this is like we could able to see these divisions throughout the world. Every country there is a formal and informal sector. Although there is no authentic information about the total number of women workers working in this informal sector, as per the census 2001, almost 90% of the women work in this sector of the economy. Like for example, if the women are part of the market economy or capitalist mode of production, most of the women, due to their less education as well as low skilled, they were part of the informal sector rather than the formal sector. So women who work in the market, those women, 90% of those women, they are part of the informal sector. That we need to keep in our mind. To be more precise, according to 2001 census report, there are 60,000 women workers under the categories of main workers, marginal workers and household industries. So according to the one latest study, we could able to find that 9.6 crore women work in informal sector. This study was part of the initiative for what works to advance women and girls in the economy. Then you could able to see that how much percentage of the women who work in the informal sector. You all must be wondering why large percentage of the women work in the informal sector. One reason I have already mentioned, that due to the low skill and less education among the women, that is the one reason they were part of the informal sector. Second one is that I am raising these questions for our learners. Why do you think that so many women work in this sector apart from what I have said so far? That is the reason. Second one is that which is also known as unorganized sector, as I have mentioned already, in terms of conditions and wages are not defined in any specific way. If you look at the informal sector, you could able to come to know that there is no definition how much money or amount they get after when they work in the informal sector, and wages are low as work done here is considered as less productive, less valuable. So most of the women, they work in informal sector, even though there are so much of physical labor involved in this sector, still whatever they work, they do in this informal sector, that is considered as less productive and less value. Do you think women's labor is less valuable than men's labor? That is what whatever our discussion clearly shows. So which system of society and economy maintain these discriminations on the basis of sexual difference? Indeed, our modern society, what we are what we are doing as, and what we are experiencing as a capitalist society, that does discriminate men's and women's labor and work. It is called the patriarchy. All of us are from from the program Gender and Development Studies or Masters in Economics. Already we have introduced the concept patriarchy, so there is no need for me to again explain the concept patriarchy. Let us learn how this patriarchy operates in the market. Because of this patriarchy, the women are discriminated and women are not equally considered as male in the market economy. It is said that women typically have two jobs. All of us, we must know and we have experienced or we have seen. One job is the household or domestic work, and another one is the informal or formal sector. Even when the women, they go to office, they have to complete all the household tasks and they go to work. Again they come back and they do the household task. And if you look at the women, they were forever busy with their work. Yet, whatever they work, they are doing at the household level as well as in the market, they are not valued and they are not considered as less value, and it does not like giving much does not giving much value. That's why they are not able to earn like male members in the society. Their work is not yet to be calibrated. This we need to see that. So women is, when we talk about the women's work, they are doubly or triply burdened due to the existing patriarchy as well as because of the clear demarcation of gender roles, and the society expects certain activities to be performed by the women. That's why they need to perform the task at the private space, that is at the household level, as well as they have to, even if they work in the market, they are part of the informal sector, where even though they contribute much for the informal sector, but it is not valued and they earn much lesser than the male members in the society. In both the places, wherever the women work, whether it's a public space or private space, women work is not valued, as I have said, and their labor itself devalued by the capitalist patriarchy. As I said in the beginning itself, about the nature of informal sector, that it is considered akin to household structure in its essence. Like for example, if the women, most of the women, due to the less education and less skill, they themselves prefer to work in the informal sector rather than the formal sector. That one thing. Second thing is that since the women, they are they are expected to do the certain kinds of care activities in the household level, as well as most of them, they are not empowered and they are not allowed to exercise their agency, so they may not be able to negotiate at the household level. Since they are not able to negotiate within the household, the same thing it reflects when they go to the market. There also, even though they are skilled and they could able to produce valuable goods, still due to the lack of negotiation skill, they may not able to earn like male members in the society. So can you link the excessive number if the women working in the informal sector with the most women working or performing domestic labor in their own house? This is the main reason. One is the patriarchy. The patriarchy expects the women to perform certain roles, and due to the patriarchy, so most of the male members, they try to control the women's labor, they try to control the women's mobility, and as well as they try to control the women's sexuality. So they don't have any negotiating space at the household level, and even they want to be skilled and they want to be get educated. Due to the lack of opportunities and negotiating space at the private space, they may not be able to skill themselves and they may not be able to educated as they want to do the same. Since lack of education and less skill make them to work in the informal sector, as well as since they don't have any negotiating space at the private space, that same will reflect when they go to the market. That is necessary. So now you all must be understand there is a direct link between what they are performing at the household level and what they are performing at the market. So there is a link between devaluation of women's labor and majority of them getting pushed into informal sector. In both places, either they are not paid or less paid than male members in the society. So it is the nature of this unpaid labor that defines women as workers and informal sector as their field of work. Also the reason why they can find jobs here more easily, thus congregate here in large numbers. That's why large percentage of women are part of the informal sector. This is why women remain poor and men propertied. That they could able to amass the wealth by the male members. The women, they are less, they earn very less and they remain poor. The data, existing data clearly shows that the poverty percentage among women are much higher than the poverty percentage among male members. In any country or any state, the same trend is reflecting throughout the world. So they forever work for low wages or no remuneration at all of their work. For example, domestic work, it is not valued and they cannot take any remunerations whatever the domestic work they perform. For example, this division of formal and informal sector, public and private spaces, clearly it could able to suit the capitalist patriarchy as it results in profit accumulating at the end of the cycle of production, of course, for the capitalist. Now you must also understand that women's unpaid or devalued labor is the condition produced or constructed by the system of oppression of women called capitalist patriarchy. Their labor is not valueless in itself. We will soon learn what is the contribution of women's labor in the national income and the GDP performed both in the domestic realm as well as in the informal sector. It produces enormous profit and quite valuable in this sense. Next is that in one research paper titled Women Working in Informal Sector in India, a saga of lopsided utilization of human capital, the authors Geetika Tripti Singh and Anvita Gupta write that, I quote, Indian economy can well be studied in two distinct sectors, that is organized and unorganized. Unorganized, we call it as informal sector, I unquote. So the widespread informal sector in the country is the major contributor to the development, but at the same time, it is like when you look at the informal sector, as we already know that large percentage of women work in the informal sector, but this informal sector has several problems. For example, women who work in the informal sector, there is no rules, no fixed wages, no norms, no possibilities of career advancement. This was concluded by the International Conference on Economics and Finance Research in the year 2011. It is published in IPEDR Volume 4, IAC SIT Singapore. Then we could come to know that people who are work in the informal sector, they cannot, like for example, they cannot raise their voice to increase their wages, and there is no norms in the informal sector, and there is no possibilities for career advancement. Like for example, in places which are so insecure in terms of defined conditions of tenure and standard wages, the acuteness of discrimination becomes the defining feature of work. This propels us to look at the kind of work performed in the informal sector in India. Like the nature of employment in this sector of economy is termed as informal employment. So far we have studied what is informal employment, informal sector, why there is a large percentage of women are part of the informal sector. Here the nature of employment in this sector of economy is termed as informal employment. This form of employment is comprised of both self-employment in informal enterprises, that is you could able to see that small unregistered small firm, there most of the time this small firm and or unregistered firm, either it must be the family firm. In that family firm also, mostly the women, they will be part of this small unregistered firm or enterprises, they work in their family enterprises. Most of the time women may not be getting any wages from this small enterprises, or sometimes the women, they work as a wage earners or wage employment in the informal jobs without any secure contract, worker benefit or social protection. In both the places, either if they work as a work in family enterprises, or if they work as a wage employment in small informal enterprises, in both the places there is no security as far as job is concerned. There won't be any contract. The women, they may not get benefits, and there won't be any social protection. These are some of the disadvantages as far as informal employment is concerned. Women who are part of the informal sector, you could see that in which of the sectors women can be part of it. They can be construction labor workers, domestic workers, garment workers, vendors, sales girls working in beauty parlors. These are some of the places I have mentioned. In these places, the women, they work as an informal labor. None of these workers have a job security, facility for paid leave, wages are variable, depends upon. There is no uniformity in wages in this sector. These also, they don't get a regular wage. Like for example, some of them they get weekly wage, some of them they get monthly, even some of them they are part of the any of these some sectors, and they may be the daily wages. So these wages also varies, and there may not be any fixed wages in this sector. Discrimination of wages, nature of work, availability of the work on the basis of sex all lead to the vulnerability of the worker, leading to their exploitations. That we have to note it down. In any case, they come from the section of the society which must work to earn their livelihood, which is socially and economically least privileged. Most of the women work in the informal sector. They may have come from socially or economically disadvantaged sections of the population. Here also another important thing we need to note here is that women's unpaid domestic and care work influence or determine their working life outside the home. They start as unpaid workers at home. That is what in the beginning we have discussed. With a weak base, they don't have any negotiating space at the private space. Due to this weak space, they cannot afford skill training, that is what I have mentioned, or education. Thus, they may not be able to get a better job. They ended up in working in the informal sector. That is what. As well as if you look at that informal sector, they do contribute for the national economy, but that remains very invisible. As a result, they are not looked at as principal workers, this informal sector employees. But this informal sector do contribute for the national economy, or their contribution to the national economy is not counted properly. If it's counted properly, maybe the our GDP also, not only India's GDP, if every country, if they start counting the contribution of the informal sector, certainly their GDP will goes up. That is, we need to note it down. Their entry into the formal sector of work is thus very difficult, because since they are not that much skilled as expected by the formal sector, and they don't have any opportunities to make them skilled or make them educated. Most of the time, the people, specifically the women who work in the informal sector, they may not be able to get an employment opportunities in the formal sector, and very less percentage of the women, they find a job in the formal sector. If you note the contemporary trend in women's employment affected by stagnation in the formal sector and share of paid employment falling in 2000 onwards, most women have been pushed into self-employment, exposing them to the uncertainties of the market. In terms of age profile, that also we need to note it down. Informality of jobs, the level of informality is higher among young. If you look at the data, like people who are in 50 to 24 years and older persons above 65, to make our learners to have a better understanding, I would like to repeat the data. So the informal sector consisting mostly of women workers of insecure economic and caste backgrounds, and 90% of the workforce contributes 50% of the total GDP. But most of the time the national governments, they don't properly count national economy. So informal sector also is being studied more scientifically. There are thus released the data clearly shows that Economic Survey of 2018 and 19 released on 4th July 2019 said that almost 93% of the total workforce in India is informal. Niti Aayog also, as I have mentioned, released its own take on it. So in the strategy for New India at 75 November 2018, it said that 85% of all workers are employed in this sector. So if you look at this topic, you could clearly understand that the patriarchy is the main reasons for making women to work. Large percentage of women work in the informal sector. I have prepared this lecture based on the 3 units. That is, unit 1 is gender issues in work. That I have in the beginning I have started. The second one is valuation of women's work. Third unit is on participation of women in pre-industrial and industrial societies. All 3 units is part of the block 1 of the course MGSE 009. Hope our learners clearly understood this topic, that is gender issues in women's employment in the market. Thank you so much for listening this session. Thank you.